Number 9. Patrick Earl and Katie Murtaugh. In August of 2020, residents of an apartment block in Randwick, East Sydney, found a man by the name of Oliver Solon barely conscious in a corridor after he'd been stabbed multiple times. Earlier in the day, he'd been drinking with 23-year-old Patrick Earl and his girlfriend Katie Murtaugh, both originally from Ireland. The trio had returned to the couple's apartment, where an argument broke out between the men, resulted in Solon attacking Earl, injuring his arm. The latter's girlfriend messaged his friends on Facebook and asked them to come over. 4 men arrived at the apartment block and Murtaugh let them inside the unit before hiding in the bedroom. The group attacked Solon with a knife, inflicting stab wounds to his body and head, which also resulted in him losing a chunk of his ear. After Earl and the others fled, CCTV captured Murtaugh dragging the victim's body into the hall. He was rushed to the hospital and placed into emergency surgery, with his condition eventually pronounced as stable. Police scoured the area looking for the assailants. Earl was arrested at nearby Botany Street on a charge of wounding a person with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, while Murtaugh was charged with aiding and abetting to wound a person. The police argued that she knew exactly what would happen upon contacting Earl's friends. Number 8. Kaylee Halliday and Shane Miles. Leading up to early January of 2022, English pensioner Paul Wakefield had been regarded as a father figure by couple Kaylee Halliday and Shane Miles, aged 36 and 32 respectively. Wakefield had opened up his home in Folkestone, Kent, to the lovers and helped take care of Halliday's children. The kind-hearted 66-year-old referred to her and Miles as son and daughter, while they reportedly called him dad or pa. On January the 2nd, they were drinking together at Wakefield's home. At some point during the evening, an argument erupted about the man's TV being knocked down. As it escalated, the couple stabbed Wakefield in the chest with a broken vodka bottle. They also stomped on his head repeatedly, inflicting critical injuries. A friend found the bloodied pensioner at his home, and he passed away in a local hospital the following day. In the horrific attack's wake, Halliday and Miles were captured on CCTV in raptures as they kissed, caressed, and held hands, exhibiting virtually no remorse for what they'd done to their father figure. Following their arrest, they each tried to blame the other for the killing before being found guilty of murder. They were jailed for life with a minimum of 21 years served for Halliday and 22 for Miles. Number 7. Brandon and Stephanie Kimball. On May the 13th of 2020, law enforcement in Glendale, Arizona, received a 911 call from a woman named Stephanie Kimball. She told the dispatcher that an unknown woman had knocked on her door and then collapsed, becoming unresponsive. Stephanie also noted that she was covered in bruises and looked like she ran away from her boyfriend. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Stephanie's husband, 28-year-old Brandon, kneeling down next to the victim while seemingly checking for a pulse. Suspicions concerning the scene arose soon after the woman, identified as 27-year-old Brittany Hand, was taken away by paramedics. They told the police that she'd likely been dead for some time. The hospital where Brittany was taken performed a records check and found that 6 weeks before her death, she'd visited the facility accompanied by Stephanie. Upon her initial contact with the police, the latter had claimed Brittany was a stranger. During the hospital visit, the victim had reported that she'd fallen and injured her ribs. Staff noted that she then received a call from a man named Brandon, who threatened to personally come down and drag her out of the hospital if she didn't leave. The police conducted follow-up interviews with the Kimball's neighbors and found probable cause to conduct a search of their home and confiscated their phones. They found that Brittany had been in an abusive 3-way relationship with the couple. Brandon found that she'd cheated on him and punched her in the head, causing her to collapse and have a seizure. As Stephanie watched on, he kicked Brittany while she was down, then stepped on her throat until she stopped breathing. Brandon expressed no regrets during a subsequent phone conversation with an unnamed source, telling them, "I would do it again." His wife then helped clean up the body and crime scene before making the 911 call. The couple were arrested on June the 5th, whereupon Brandon was charged with murder, while Stephanie was accused of tampering with evidence and hindering prosecution. Number 6. Kimberly McClyte and Donald Anderson. California man Joseph Martin Govey was reported missing in the summer of 2019 after his family hadn't heard from him since late 2018. The man's dismemberment remains were eventually found by police divers in a lake at the Black Lake Golf Resort in Nipomo on September the 21st of 2020. 3 people were subsequently charged in connection to his murder. Benjamin Mersai, along with couple Kimberly McClyte and Donald Anderson, both in their mid-30s. The couple was allegedly involved in the traffic of firearms and illegal substances, and Govey, a reported member of the white supremacist group Public Enemy No. 1 Death Squad, was allegedly part of the operation. Disagreements had led to him being gunned down by McClyte, whom a confidential witness noted had admitted to the killing. Govey was executed in early December of 2018 at a residence on Professional Parkway in Santa Maria, before he was dismembered and thrown in the lake. The most recent available information indicated that McClyte was ordered by a judge to stand trial for murder. Her lover had been charged as an accessory, and Mersai had accepted a guilty plea to voluntary manslaughter with an expected sentence of 3 to 6 years in prison. Number 5. Robert Emil Neal and Amber Davis. Ohio couple Robert Emil Neal and Amber Davis were pulled over by police in Miami County in July of 2018 on suspicion of drunk driving. The traffic stop occurred just hours after a bank robbery at a county national branch in Adrian, Michigan. Investigators searched the lovers' Honda Civic and found multiple suitcases, nearly a dozen bottles of expensive alcohol, and around $5,000 in cash. Extensive evidence connected them to the previous county national robbery, including bills with pre-recorded serial numbers, a stolen pistol, and a partially burned demand note. Investigators would also find that 5 minutes before the county national heist, Neal had passed a note to a teller at a KeyBank branch. He motioned to his hip to indicate he had a weapon, but the teller told him to get out of the bank upon noticing that he wasn't in fact armed. The couple were taken into custody, and while 36-year-old Davis refused to give a statement, Neal cooperated to say that he'd rather be charged federally than locally. Based on his affidavit, the 44-year-old told the police, "When this all started, I knew there was an end game." He then admitted that he and his lover had been on a crime spree lasting several weeks. From June the 16th to July the 2nd, Davis and Neal were suspected of robbing 8 banks across 5 Midwest states, including their native Ohio, as well as Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan. Neal had been caught on CCTV on June the 26th, handing a note to a teller in Mooresville, Indiana. Footage was shared by local police, which led to an anonymous tip that pointed to Neal as the bank robber. He and Davis faced a plethora of charges in connection to their crime spree, which was likely to result in multiple sentences, as state and federal governments were allowed to try people for the same offense without violating double jeopardy. Number 4. John Tay Collier and Eric Dodds. A couple popular on TikTok and OnlyFans were arrested by U.S. authorities in August of 2022 after multiple eyewitnesses connected them to the fatal shooting of 29-year-old Dakota Bradshaw. The latter had been gunned down through the window of a residence in the small town of Rossville, Georgia, on August the 1st. The main suspects, John Tay Collier and Eric Dodds, both aged 23, had amassed over 800,000 followers on TikTok through their pro-LGBTQ+ content. Their vehicles, a Dodge Ram and Dodge Challenger that were often featured in their videos, had been spotted parked in the driveway of the residence where the shooting had occurred. The authorities executed a search warrant 100 miles away in Huntsville, Alabama, where a local SWAT team working in conjunction with the United States Marshals Task Force arrested Collier on August the 10th. His lover subsequently spoke out in his defense on TikTok, assuring their followers that he was innocent and that they'd soon return to making videos together. Less than a week later, Dodds was also taken into custody in Huntsville. As of the latest updates on the case, the lover's connection to Bradshaw remained unspecified, and law enforcement was still trying to determine which of them had acted as the gunman. Number 3. Kyle Roy and Julia Konchek. 25-year-old Kyle Roy and his girlfriend, Julia Konchek, aged 21, were arrested by law enforcement in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in connection to a robbery at a supermarket on Woodbury Street, Newington. The incident occurred in February of 2013 and was caught on surveillance footage. Konchek walked past a woman only identified as being in her 40s and visiting from Florida as she was opening a freezer door in the produce section. Konchek tried to snatch her purse, spilling its contents, and they ended up wrestling on the floor. Roy then grabbed the victim's wallet before he and his girlfriend fled. The victim was unhurt and the thieving couple were located after footage of the altercation was featured on the news. The authorities were able to obtain their license plate information, and a Portsmouth officer initiated a traffic stop on Cabot Street. Roy and Konchek jumped out of the car and fled, but were later tracked down with the help of a canine unit. They were found hiding out in the basement of a house on Sheridan Street, while the homeowner was unaware, and taken into custody on felony charges of strong arm robbery. Today's topic was requested by Michelle Olson. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Alexis Lynn Rupert and Neil Rice. On May the 15th of 2022, Miami resident Emmanuel Antonio Tinoco arranged to buy a Rolex watch from 21-year-old Alexis Lynn Rupert. The pair had been previously acquainted, and Rupert worked for an escort services under aliases that included Brooke Vertuna, Giselle, and Lexi. They met up at the Pacific Point Luxury Apartments in Lauderdale Lakes. 29-year-old Tinoco parked a gray Mercedes-Benz S550, and a woman matching Rupert's description was seen getting out and walking towards the building. When she got out, two men, one of whom was identified as Rupert's boyfriend, Neil Rice, were spotted approaching the Mercedes from either side. One of them then opened fire on Tinoco with an AK-47 assault rifle, striking him 5 times as he sat in his car. The emergency services were called to the scene, where Tinoco was eventually pronounced dead. In addition to cell phone information, the authorities found fingerprints, a long strand of blonde hair, and further DNA evidence connecting Rice and Rupert to the shooting. In the aftermath, the couple fled Florida but were eventually tracked down and arrested in Austin, Texas on charges of first-degree murder. Number 1. Benjamin Bateman and Alana Cootie. A pair of young lovers from the town of Carshalton, England, were arrested in May of 2018 for robbing a man at gunpoint with an imitation firearm. 20-year-old Benjamin Bateman and Alana Cootie, aged 19, targeted Alex Landless at a railway station in Banstead. They were both masked and covered in black from head to toe. Cootie kept the weapon on the victim while Bateman took his phone and wallet before whispering into his ear, "Remember, we know where you live." Landless suffered from significant psychological trauma in the aftermath, which included frequent panic attacks. Law enforcement were able to track Cootie's movements and identified her as a suspect after she'd called a taxi for her and Bateman. She was arrested on a separate matter on May the 23rd by the Metropolitan Police, who began questioning her after flagging her wanted stats. They established her connection to Bateman. When he attended Cootie's remand hearing on May the 26th, he was arrested as well. The couple denied any wrongdoing but were ultimately convicted of robbery, possession of an imitation firearm, and 2 counts of fraud by false representation. They were jailed for 7 years each. Thanks for watching. Would you rather go on a date with Bill Cosby or have dinner with Jeffrey Dahmer at his house? Let us know in the comments section below.